Welcome everyone. Today we have very important sessions. We will discuss about World Toilet Organizations. We have our world famous speakers, professors, entrepreneur, Professor Jackson. Previously, when we do a specials conference with Rwanda government and Collated Lab, first time we discuss about Mr. Jackson initiative, especially our speakers, they discuss about Mr. Jackson initiative several times. I think 3 times we discussed. Then I get a chance to discuss with Mr. Jackson, and he's a very helpful man, very innovative entrepreneurs, very helpful for the developing worlds. So we have our Professor Jackson, as well as we have our Professor David Smith from ETT, Professor Donalds, all of them actually our board of advisor. If Professor Jackson agree, we want to invite him in our board of advisor in World Talent Economy Forum. Definitely we will share our vision. Our vision is very simple. We want to focus on meritocracy. We want to give chance to all of the talented people of the developing world. And second things, we want to develop a better ecosystem for developing world with the help of developed world. So we want to minimize the gap. Singapore definitely a good model for poverty reductions, for good healthcare system, for good education system. This is model. I'm also from a developing world, and I know your solution, World Toilet Organization solutions, how important it is. Because I grew in a small village called Rajbari in Bangladesh, and I know that this is very important for developing world. Many people actually die because they do not have good sanitation and this kind of solution. So Professor Jackson, we want to learn from you. We want to hear from you. Professor Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have been to Rwanda. It's absolutely safe country. I sit on the back of a motorcycle, $2 US, and I can go everywhere. And Rwanda is now the fastest growing African state because they call themselves the Singapore of Africa. So I grew up also in poverty in Singapore, and I just learned along the way how poor people become wealthy people, and our country has turned from third world to first world. So during my childhood, our toilet is the British bucket system, and when I grew up, I realized that 2.5 billion people don't have toilet. So in 20 years ago, I started the World Toilet Organization, and I learned how to create a global movement where we can go to the UN and go to the prime minister or presidents or ministers of countries, and we just talk to them, and there's no real barrier. And then we start to commit to do work together. And when you play at the highest level, you can create movement that goes very fast. So of course, first of all, why would all these top people wants to meet me? I'm just a person who is without authority. I'm not a government person. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm just a storyteller. But I use humor because the subject of toilet is very disgusting and very embarrassing, and people find very difficult to speak about it. So since people find difficult, they don't speak about it, and they call it a water agenda, which is quite ridiculous. Water is water. Sanitation is sanitation. Water is not shit, right? So when we go out there, we just use common language, use all kind of very creative images, and then the media became my friend. And every year we reach out to about 2.5 billion audiences on an advertising budget of $0. And the media soon became regular follower. And from that, we create the fourth estate power. And when you have this fourth estate power, you can then attract the politician who wants to win election. So they promise people toilet, they call us there, they host our World Toilet Summit every year. They pay us a lot of money to host this World Toilet Summit, and they win election and people gets toilets. So for toilet to become a election issue, it was the media. And so by storytelling, we created policy change, we created celebrities. And you see pictures like this is very funny. And when we use this kind of images, uh, then Prime Minister Modi promised to build a toilet for everyone. And so it is the biggest toilet construction project in the entire history of mankind, right? So now he's built so much toilet, are people using it? So again, he's just forgotten uh, to do the um, uh, demand drive while doing the supply drive. So the purpose of World Toilet Organization, our mission, is to make sure everybody have toilets. And over the last 20 years, 2.5 billion new people have toilets. And there's still another 2 billion people who don't have toilet because these are new population over the last 20 years. And then eventually we have to solve that. So what I'm trying to explain in a short time is that storytelling is a starting point to generate a lot of movement, and then you let the people do it themselves. And President Clinton came to make commitment with me to say let's go and change the world. So I say let's find a bigger one. 4 billion people are outside our formal economy, and they earn less than $5.50 US a day, and let's bring them into our formal economy. So I pledged 10 years ago with him to build a World Trade Center for the poor, and now I've completed the building. So you saw it in one of the slides. And this building is a 10 million Singapore dollars building. So in Malaysia term will be a $30 million. And uh, we do it as a like this building called the SDG Center. It's 65,000 square feet, and we want it to be the logistics center, fintech, cleantech, agri-tech, water tech, housing, low cost housing, trade hub. So what we want to do is to find all the solutions that are available to disseminate it to all the people who still don't know them. So by scaling up instead of doing it ourselves, creating an algorithm, a platform to help people match partnership, this is our work. So maybe I will pause over here and go into our discussion and receive any questions. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Jackson. We have our other speakers, Professor David Smith from ETT and Professor Donald. Both of them actually are our honorable board of advisor. Professor David Smith, what you want to add? One thing I just want to add: in my childhood, my biggest fear to go to toilet, because I'm from developing world. I think Professor Jack visited Bangladesh. He worked with Dr. Fazle Hassan Abed with BRAC. It's the largest. But we have a very big house. It's around 130 acres land. But toilet is a far from my house, very far. So Professor Jack. So this is one of the biggest fears in my childhood to go to toilet. So I know what actually Professor Jackson actually doing. Uh, so maybe you can develop a better life for the new children in Bangladesh or in India. Professor David Smith, what you want to add? Can you unmute, please?
Sharif, I agree with you. That's some of the biggest fears. I mean, I have a little boat that I take offshore fishing, and it takes me hours to get out to where the blue water is, and yeah, it has a little bitty tiny tarlet on it, and it's a fear to go there, particularly if the water's rough. But no, I grew up with part of my family would go out to a little farm not far outside of Dallas, and I was introduced to outhouses there and the hole in the ground and everything. So you see that. But what I've noticed is I've traveled a lot and we see so many different formats as we look at how sanitation is done, how you see toilets around the world, and it took a little getting used to. I mean, my first trips through Asia were a shock to me as I began to try to do that. But if you get down to the base level, though, this is a very important initiative because as you see it going, um, the sanitation of the communities has such an impact upon disease, and those conditions are very important to maintain there. I've done a lot of work with some organizations that move around the world and do things, and even if you look at the impacts on the water table, the amount of contaminants that get introduced into the water table from inappropriate sanitation, it is actually more than any of us would imagine. And if you begin to look at some of the tests, you see it. One of the interesting things I learned in some of the work I did is even at some of the deepest depths in the ocean, you can see contamination in the water and the sediments there at those depths even. So it's a very important issue. It's how do you put the pieces together and how to make it make sense in today's economies. So Sharif, thank you.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Donald, what you want to add for today's session?
Well, first off, I really appreciate what Jack is doing, because I've got interested in this and read quite a bit, well, some about it, and discovered that there's a contrast between two countries. One of them is Bangladesh and the other one is India. And Bangladesh adopted a national program to try and get people to create latrines. And they did a quite fantastic job. So you basically ask the question, how many people are going to the bathroom outside in unsanitary conditions where the effluent could wind up in the water or other places where it could affect people's health? And you find that Bangladesh has managed to pass India in the ability to have latrines and toilets and the ability for people. And that's had a direct impact on the health of people in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh's health has gone up. And, if kids get dysentery at the time of their life when they should be learning stuff and they should be playing and they should be growing, it sets them back. And it's really important for children and everyone to be healthy, for a healthy country and a healthy economy and for health in general. It's so it's incredibly, what Jack is doing is absolutely incredibly important. It's something that makes a huge difference in the world. I also want to mention that the research that I do is in is persuasive technology, and I'm specially interested in how it works for larger groups of people. And it's very difficult to study it because it's, the question is, how do you measure it and things like that? If you're trying to be scientific about it, but the core to it is, and the thing that I'm most interested in is how our stories that we tell ourselves about the world affect what we wind up doing. And if we learn these stories from the people around us, from the media and various kinds of things, and those stories become our reality, because there's places all over the world, no matter how much you've traveled, there's places you've never been. But you can talk about those places and you can imagine what they're like, and you get together with other people and you all talk about these places as if you know what they're like. And these stories that you develop about the rest of the world are the rest of the world to you. You've never been there. You have a kind of an imagination about what everything is outside of where you actually are. Even places that you've been have changed. So you imagine a place that you were 20 years ago and imagine that it's the same. Well, it might have changed. These are the stories that we live in. We live in these networks of stories. And so I think what Jack was saying about offering people new stories so that they can like have choices, because that's what limits your choices really in a way, is the basically possibilities that you have that come from these stories. And so I really was excited about what Jack was saying about changing the narratives to create change and to be able to get people to have the choices to do what they need to do and to adopt better sanitation. I mean, if people don't know it's important, why do it? And so that's incredibly, really appreciate what he's doing. So that's what I'm going to say right now.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Professor Jack, like when you started your organizations, so what is your mission? Actually, our audience, Onika Sham, this is her questions. And beside that, I want to say that, like, what do you want to see your organization next 5 years, at least in the COVID situation?
So people are shy to talk about going to the toilet because they have been told since childhood that it is very rude to say these kind of things, right? And as a child, you would be innocent and laugh about poop and pee and all that, and you will be scolded. Your uncle is here. Come on, behave yourself, and so on and so forth. And after a while, you just grow up to say, I'm so good looking, I'm so wholesome. How could I even produce a pungent smell? How could I even admit to people that I farted? How could I shit? So this is a sense of state of denial that automatically get cultivated. So, and it's even worse with women. How can I say I'm bleeding blood from my uh, vagina? And so these are all unspoken things. And when you don't speak about something, you cannot improve. And so a lot of women suffers when they don't have proper menstrual hygiene. And how do you go and change this subject? You just go and tell it in a way that is not rude, not vulgar, but that people can take it. So there's a very thin line. So I use humor. And the treatment is just right. And until today, I don't get this other people talking like that. That's why we are the only source of communication in the fastest way for the media. So the media keep following us because another professor will call it fecal sludge management. And then a journalist don't know how to write a report called fecal sludge management. We just say shit, right? And that's so much easier. And so uh, the mission is to make the subject of going to the toilet a normal subject, just like eating and drinking. You have to get it out of your body. And so if we eventually can make this subject normal, then we will have broke the taboo, just like the sex revolution, the apartheid revolution, the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the slavery, the woman liberation. In the history of mankind, there are so many taboo that when it was broken, it just feels normal. But before it was broken, it feels like so difficult to talk about, you know. And so there are a few more taboos, so I just picked this one. Another one is death. People don't talk about dying. So I also think as I grow older, I'm going to die, so I want to talk about dying. But I think first we talk about toilets. And then the next thing I saw is that half of the world are not in our formal economy. So we have to end poverty, and I create a second organization called the BOP Hub. And then as I talk about toilets so much, eventually all 193 countries of the United Nations General Assembly adopted our founding day, 19th of November, as the official World Toilet Day. So suddenly it becomes unanimously agreed by every country. So World Toilet Day is observed when people are free to talk about this. And then as they keep on uh, handling the subject, they realize that they have permission, and they realize that it is no more something shy to talk about. And so I think that what we do is that we let it all out, you know. We make people let go of their inhibition and make people able to come out to speak. And once you speak, you start to demand it, and then things get better. Toilet has to appear in your mind first. You must want to have a toilet, then a toilet will appear on the ground later on. If you don't want a toilet, somebody built a toilet for you, you will use it as a storeroom. You might even abandon it. So in South Africa, I visited a lot of school toilets that are vandalized and nobody is using it because they even don't have the concept of maintaining a toilet. So therefore, why did you build it in the first place? It's such a waste of money. Unless people want it, you cannot give it to them. So Bangladesh is successful because the Bangladesh uses the mosque, the religion, to talk about najis, dirty, to talk about being clean when you come 5 times to God to pray. And when you are coming to pray, you have to be clean, otherwise that prayer will be invalid. So uh, the leaders in the mosque, right? They are all promoting toilets. So it's very, very fast. In India, when we first went in, they were arguing about temple first or toilet first, and it seems to be a conflict. And I say, why don't we use the chief, the use the priest to promote toilet? And eventually, I got into an alliance with this Hindu Swami, and he's moved all the other Swamis together. And personally, I don't have religion. I go to the Vatican City and talk to the assistants of the Pope. I go to Bangladesh to talk to the uh, Muslim leader, and then I go to India to become part of the Hindu people everywhere. And as long as it works, then it works because you have to let them take it, give agency to them, and they decide what is going to happen.
Thank you, Professor Jack. Professor David Smith. Some of the really interesting aspects Professor Jackson actually bring from developing world, especially about toilet, about religion, about culture, and even this week we have a session on poverty reduction. So this is also another important aspect Professor Jackson actually sharing with us. You are also part of ETT, a largest corporation. This kind of corporation actually more focus on technology and technology innovation. How do you think about developing world? What is your perception and how you want to contribute? Like different angle, what actually Professor Jackson actually sharing with our audience?
Well, Sharif, as you set up here, if I look globally, and let me use the word globally, because some of the issues we are discussing also has impact in developed world as well. When I travel, for example, through some of the Native American lands, as I travel out across the rural areas, down on the coast, and things like that, we see these same type of conditions. And it really is, I believe, how do you motivate the human spirit? How do you get people motivated to work collaboratively together? Because to solve issues like this, it's not one person doing one thing. It's getting people to work together, to pull them together in the common goal. In the area of technology transfer, we have a saying that it's really hard to push a rope, but pulling a rope is much easier. And I think it's the same thing in issues like this. You have to convince multiple people to pull the rope together. That Jack, that Donald, or I, or Sharif, you can only do so much pushing the rope. And as I look at the developing world, it's really how do we put the different elements in place, the public policy, the cultural mandates, and the group will, to be able to address issues such as this and to successfully have people moving forward. I think what Jack Sim has been doing is a great way to move this forward, but it's really how do you use the group intelligence and the group thought to advance this even faster and further.
Thank you, Professor Donald. I know you are also a big fan of developing world. But example, in this COVID-19 situations, if I give you a chance, I know you are a very good researcher, to solve any unique problem like Professor Jackson, because he's solving toilet-related problem. What do you want to solve? How do you want to solve? Or what is your advice?
Well, I think something that Jack said is really very, very important to consider, which is that there is no homogeneous society in the world. Every person lives in a place where they hear from the other people around them, and they ask themselves the question, who can I be? What is the possibilities of my life? And then how do they know? They know from what they hear from other people. They may, in some cases, they may watch movies from America and get a very distorted perception of what America is like, and strive for things that are basically fantasies. But the point is that Jack made, and I think is what the research that we've done tells us over and over, is that everyone lives in this little network of stories that are their little network of stories. So what Jack was saying about getting into different religions, well, religions are often are sets of stories that people have to be able to explain the world and to make sense of things. And so if you come with your view of the world and how you make sense of the world, and you try and say to people, well, this is the way that it isn't going to work. So what you have to do is you have to understand and listen. I mean, the biggest, most important thing is listening, because then you start to understand the stories that the people have that explain the world to them and make sense of the world. And then when you can get there, you can start understanding. I mean, what Jack was saying about not wanting to talk about shit and piss and things like that. I mean, it's the same in America. I mean, all over the world, there's restrictions on what you can talk about, and that you grow up with that. I mean, it's real to you. I mean, that's what's real and important to you, and so being able to have other stories that people accept that's the key to making change. So the answer to what your question is that it isn't going to be the same for everybody. To find out, you have to go and understand these people and their needs, because you could come up with this thing like saying, oh, we've done research and we've done this and that, and we're absolutely sure that the best thing you could do is this. and we're gonna teach you to do this. And it's like, what does it mean to them? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't help them explain the world and make sense of things. So what you need to so the answer is it's different for not only every country, or not even every culture, but almost every city and town. People have different ways of explaining the world and understanding that. And so that, to me, that's the most fun thing in life, is to be able to go into people. And like Jack, I can be pretty funny. And what really makes me happy is when I have Japanese students, for an instance, and I can get them all laughing, because I think to myself, good, I've gotten to know them well enough that I can get them to laugh. And I can get Indian students to laugh, and I can get people everywhere to laugh. And I don't think I'd be able to do that unless I got into their world. And that's, I think, the key to making change. It's different everywhere. There's no one solution. And so if I just sat here and said, well, this is the best thing to do, I'd be doing exactly the opposite of what I think is valuable and important to change.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Jack, there are some questions from audience. I want to take two questions. Number one, Ali Ahmed, what strategies could help the underprivileged nations to improve their toilet? And I think this is also very important for Nur Fazreen from Malaysia. Do you think women health is largely connected with the proper toilet?
Yeah, I think that the woman health and woman privacy, if you go to the bush without the privacy, you get all the men peeping at you. It's very dangerous. First of all, peeping Tom makes you lose your dignity, your privacy. But then some men get aroused and they start to rape and molest the girl. And in many cases in India, they kill the girl after they rape them because they don't want evidence. And the worst thing is, if they are Dalit, that means they are untouchable, low caste, then even the other people would not take up the case. So there's a lot of injustice going on. The other point about women, when there's no toilet, adolescent girls are going to school and they are menstruating and there's no place to change sanitary napkin. They don't want to go to school. So if they don't go to school 1 week every month, they miss the lesson, they could not catch up. And so much related problem happen. They drop out of school, they continue in poverty. And this hand washing itself, just washing your hands with soap, cutting your fingernails, this itself is not very often possible. They don't have soap. So when they eat with their hands, after they touch their butts, you can say left hand touch the butt and right hand eat the hand. Eventually, when you wash, you are rubbing it together. So it's not so easy to theoretically isolate. And then what happens? If you're washing your hand by one hand, it's not going to be clean, right? So you have to wash 15, 20 seconds before the hands become clean and have with soap. So all this, if hygiene was possible, then 50% of all the hospital bed in developing country will be eliminated. Waterborne diseases, all gone, right? So if you think about COVID is basically a hygiene issue. Social distancing, not to get this vapor going to let you breathe in. And hand washing and not touching surfaces that are contaminated by others and cleaning up. You know, COVID told us prevention is cheaper than cure. And if we are able to focus on prevention, then sanitation is the key to human survival. In the long term, we can replace half of all the hospital by using sensors and data collection from our toilet, because our toilet download a lot of data. You can figure out whether you have colorectal cancer or diabetes or heart attack or whatever. You can figure that out. So we can move from curative health to predictive and preventive health. So the toilet is amazing. In the future, you will diagnose yourself, and every day your health will be on your cell phone, just like a Fitbit. And you will save a lot of money, a lot of diseases. I think talking about toilet begins all these things.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. What is your advice? How tech corporations can contribute in this industry or collaborate in this industry? What do you think?
Well, one of the very good things that has happened over the last decade is large corporations have stepped up and realized that they're part of global citizenship, and that these issues go beyond the bottom line in many corporations, particularly the large global corporations. And my experience with them is you have to get a united front from senior leadership all the way down to individual contributors. And as you begin to do that, you begin to be able to make the corporations begin to become really pretty good corporate citizens as you look at how they can support issues like this. I can tell you, I've seen it many times across issues, both in the United States and in some of the international areas where we've worked. I've seen corporations step up and, for example, solve problems similar to this across Brazil, where they become the global citizen that's necessary to enact change. And again, I think it's going back, as I had said earlier, it's beginning to say, how do you pull people together to understand this as an issue, motivate the leadership, motivate the resources that are brought to bear to solve this type of problem?
Thank you. Professor Donald, one of the important aspects from our audience, like why people are shy to open up their most vital issue, sanitation.
Well, it's what it's what I just said, is that you grow up in this network of stories that are that teach you what's real. And so if you've been taught all your life that it's not something that you talk about, and as he pointed out, women can be, it's easy for, I can't necessarily speak for them, but from what I've read and studied, is it is a little embarrassing, and it is something that they don't really want to talk about, or menstruation. And in some cultures, they're actually considered dirty, and they're not supposed. It's considered a bad thing, and so when you wind up with things like that, it doubles up and triples up the difficulties. From what I've read, I haven't been to rural India myself and talked to people, which is, makes it harder to completely be sure of what I say. But from what I've read, people just don't know. They don't understand the relationship between washing your hands and health. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're unwilling to do it. In some cases, like as Jack said, they don't have soap. They don't have clean water to wash their hands with. And if you don't have that, no matter how much you want to do it, it's very difficult to do it. If things are available to them and they have the choice to be able to do it, they still have to realize that it's important. And that's where I think that I want to emphasize that it's some articles that recently came out about people studying the people that are unwilling to get vaccines because they're afraid of them for some reason, and so it's kind of exacerbating the COVID problem because people aren't doing the things that are necessary to prevent its spread. And so the question gets to be is, how can you convince somebody that's already decided that it's a bad idea? How can you get them to change their minds? And some people are very, very militant about it, but there's this whole group that are kind of in the middle. They're just afraid, and they hear these stories from people that make them more afraid. So the question is how do you get people to change? And what we're finding is that people are willing to listen to their respected leaders. So in the United States, celebrity endorsements don't work that well. But oftentimes their doctor, their priest, their minister, people like that they trust to have some sort of knowledge of the subject and their best interests at heart. It may not be true. I mean, there's lots of priests that are creeps, but they spend a lot of time getting trained to convince people that they care about them. I actually knew a priest, and he said, "Yeah, they teach you how to look at people in this loving, caring way, so that they believe that you care about them." You probably could be thinking about playing golf, but they don't know that. So anyway, what you need to do is to, as I said, go into each place and find out who's important to them and who's the leaders, and get to be friends with them and get them to understand that that you're going to be able to help them. And I also want to emphasize that what I said earlier about if children wind up getting dysentery, if women are afraid to go to school a week a month, that's an important one that I've read about too. Well, you're losing women as part of your part of the strength of your country, or your place. And women, it's been shown that if you have a majority of women on the board of directors of your company, it does much better financially. Women are better managers than men. It's just the way it is. And so we really don't want to, anything that can be done to, but then again, that's something that's an issue too, is that, people don't value women enough sometimes. And so that makes it a difficult thing. Like you say, oh, we're going to do this thing so women can go to school. And then somebody says, even in America, there's plenty of people who say, you should just learn to have babies and cook. That's what women are for. There's plenty of people who say that. And so and what is that? That's a story that they tell themselves. That's all that it is. And they need to have different stories to tell themselves about the world and what they can do. So that's what, actually, I can show you papers. There's research on this quite a bit.
Thank you. Professor Jackson, there are many interesting aspects actually our speakers, our audience, they actually bring. You also bring another interesting aspect, even the women empowerment. This is very important for us. And with this toilet strategy, I believe that this is also very important for women. Yes, one of my PhD on glass ceiling factors, I think we have to improve a lot. Even you are working on poverty reductions. We have a session this week about poverty reductions. Even in the developing world, how we count GDP. Actually, women contributions never add to the GDP. let's say example in the grassroots level, women contributing through vegetable production, through some household work, but it never counted in the economy through proper GDP and these kind of things. How we can improve? My question is that actually how we can engage more with these grassroots level people, with your project, with other speakers' projects, how we can improve their economic life.
So the world is designed in a masculine way. So long ago, we live in communes, and the communes have some kind of balance between male and female. But then we started as men realize that we can actually go to the next village and kill all the men and rape all the women and then have a lot of their cattle and their cows and a lot of children of our own. And why don't we do that? So the story of empire building, murder, plunder, and rape is a masculine story. Just go out there and kill other people and take all their land, all their goats, all their cattle, and all their women. And so, if we continue this, then you see the American military industrial complex is the biggest employer of America. And so it has to generate war. Otherwise, how to feed all these people? And who's going to buy my weapon if there's no war? So if you think about this masculine rape and plunder machine, then what will happen is that the world just get more and more dangerous. But what if we turn it into a feminine approach? And what is the feminine approach? It's not female. Yeah? Male and female can also practice masculine or feminine approach. The feminine approach is to facilitate. It's like mother nature. You go to the nature, you never see the mother, but you know that something is arranging all these things in a harmonious manner in an ecosystem. And if we were to design our society in an ecosystem, then it will work. For example, animals eat and they shit. If you have big animal, you eat more and you shit more. If you're a small animal or you're a worm, you eat less and you shit less. So that is basically the taxation system of the forest. You consume and you tax. And your tax is the shit that fertilizes the next crop for another wandering animal group to come and eat this crop while you're eating other people's crop fertilized by other people's shit. There is no refrigerator in the forest. There's no bank. There's no Bahamas Island or some tax haven. There's no tax lawyers. Now you just consume and you pay taxes. And if we were to design it in this mother nature feminine manner, we'll have a very sustainable society. But right now we're designing it to move money to the 0.1% person. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, all Jack Ma and all these people, and then they take all the money. This is a masculine rape and plunder model in a new modern society. So I think the solution is to step back and to introduce the facilitation just like Mother Nature. So there are three mothers. One is your mother in the family, facilitating the family. The other is Mother Nature, facilitating the whole world. And the third mother is a digital mother called the internet, facilitating all the people into connecting with one another. Then these three mother becomes the new economy. But we have to rewrite the entire economic model and not to rape and plunder. And so I just want to give you an example. Last year in Brazil, we changed the law in Brazil. 50% of all the shit in Brazil is not treated. So they just pump it into the river, into the beach, the landfill, and they're spreading a lot of diseases. So we facilitate a conversation with the Senate. I go to Brasilia and I lobbied the Senate in 2019 in September. Then we gather all of them in the World Toilet Summit in Sao Paulo on November 19, World Toilet Day. And so the senator were convinced 2 months before. They start to write the bill. They launch it in Sao Paulo on November, and then the bill went through the entire process. By June last year, 7 months later, it became law, and 13.3 billion US dollar of investment from China went into the sewage treatment plant in Brazil. So just nudging, pushing people a little bit across the threshold, it works wonders. And the voice of the World Toilet Organization is a feminine voice. It's a voice to facilitate, and you decide what to do. We can't do what you want to do for you, but we can nudge, we can change the way you think, we can influence government policy. And I think what we need to do for every aspect in the world is to move away from dictating and say, you must have this, you must do it our way. Don't impose on others. Let them decide themselves, but facilitate with options so that they can all grow in the way they enjoy growing, and nobody needs to be poor. Nobody needs to be poor. Poverty is an artificial construct, and big companies are the one who is extracting. So if we drink a cup of coffee in Starbucks, it's $6, and inside there's only 3 cents of coffee beans, and it's the main ingredient. And why must the farmer be paid 3 cents when the Starbucks charges you $6? This is a totally unfair distribution of wealth, and we've got to change that. Maybe we got to make the farmer roast their coffee and partner with little cafe everywhere and screw Starbucks.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. This is excellent idea. Even we also believe in that way. World Talent Economy Forum, we believe in that way. We should give a equal opportunity to all of the people around the world. Especially, we more care about grassroots level people, because I'm also from the developing world. I can understand the pain of the developing worlds. My father was a freedom fighter, but when he died, we cannot manage proper treatment. We cannot manage the intensive care unit because we do not have enough support in the hospital. Even he was a freedom fighter. He sacrificed most of his life for the country. So I know that there are different stories, different cultures, different things. That's why we built this World Talent Economy Forum, and we seek support from the developed world. Individually, me, I'm nothing. But the people like Professor Jackson, Professor David Smith, Professor Donald, if they support World Talent Economy Forum, we can solve millions of people problem. We can change millions of people's life. And I know millions of people actually untouched. Millions of people have a lot of challenges. But with only your collaboration, your support can change many people's life. Professor David Smith, what do you want to share your views about these grassroots level people?
Sharif, uh, my view is actually very similar with yours there. I've seen the impact of not doing this well. I've seen the impacts of people coming together and solve issues like this one. And, you know, it's to me is part of one of the other trends we often talk about is that we're in a time of lifelong learning. And it seems to me that we should go ahead and make sure that challenges and solutions such as these become part of our lifelong learning curricula, and as we put them together. And that you know, I would encourage us to look at ways to put in place a global view of making sure that every learning organization in the world begins to look at some of the issues that the World Toilet Association has laid out so well, and that becomes part of our lifelong learning initiative, is to understand things like this and to stay up to date. And again, to go from having the knowledge and moving from the knowledge into action. You know, if I just have the data, information, knowledge, if you don't move it to wisdom and action, it's not worth much. And I think that's very important for us to do today.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Donald, what's your remarks about these grassroots level people, especially in the developing world?
Well, I want to start out by mentioning that Finland is year after year the happiest country in the world. And I've lived there, and man, it's pretty darn grim in the winter. The sun doesn't come up for, at least where I live, the sun would come up about 4 hours a day. And it was pretty cold. But yet people are happier there than anywhere else in the world. Now, how could that be? Well, I want to point out that the entire government of Finland is women under 35 years old, including their prime minister. They all are women. And so when you're there, like in the United States, we're fighting right now. There's people that are violently opposed to paid maternal leave. But in Finland, you get basically you get a certain amount of maternal leave, and then you get even more that you get to divide between the father and the mother. So they can decide who is going to take the time off, because a mother might want to work too. I mean, it's not like you have to completely throw everything at the women. And so in the countries really vary, and surprisingly, the United States has a very strong pull towards this authoritarian, masculine. Some cultures do, like, for instance, I've been reading that Latinx people in the United States, the men especially, gravitate towards Trump, because even though he's called them rapists and murderers. I can't even imagine why anybody would like somebody like that. But they like him because they perceive him as being very masculine and very tough. And and to them that's desirable. And how can we get from there to here to there? Because as Jack and I pointed out, you can't just tell people that they should do things differently. Now, one thing that I think is really valuable, and I've mentioned this before in this show, is that there was a study in Science, which is basically the top scientific journal in the United States. It's done by the American Association of Science, totally peer reviewed by the top experts. It's when you read something in that, it's gold. And they did a study about climate change, which is an incredibly important issue, but yet there's many people in the United States who don't believe it's a problem. They say, well, climate always changes, and we're going to adapt. I don't know if you notice this, but the Thwaites Glacier is about to lose the ice that holds it back. And if that slid into the ocean, it'd raise sea levels 2 feet, which is quite a bit. And the way the Earth spins, it's interesting. It doesn't affect me as much because on the West Coast, the sea level doesn't rise as much. And the East Coast, it rises way, way more than 2 feet. So I'm just mentioning that is really a critical issue. In Finland, they have sensors in all of their lakes. And if anything goes different, somebody's putting pollution in their lakes, they know it right away. And they send people out there to figure out what the heck is going on. And they have very strict laws against doing that, because as he was saying, in a feminine culture, they're looking to the future. They're not thinking about what can I do today to be the toughest person and win this fight, and they're thinking, what are my children good? What are my children and my children's children? What are their lives going to be like? And we all can learn to think that way. And what I'm saying is that every person that's where you get your stories. You get your stories from the people around you. And I think something like this is incredibly valuable because we get people from different cultures. I was fortunate enough to meet the people from Rwanda and be on the show with them. I get to learn about people. I don't know what you can do. I wish there was a way magically you could do it to have people be interested in each other, because that's all it takes. And then get out the stories like Jack is doing. Get it so that if I talk to somebody, I can telling the story I'm telling right now about how corporations that have women on their boards are more successful. Countries that are run by women, the people are happier, they're more successful. When people realize that, they may object to it, but it puts something in their mind so they can start asking the question, well, gosh, let me look around and see if that's true or not. And wow, that's actually true. That's pretty interesting. And so I think the grassroots level is where the change happens. It can't happen from the top. You can't make people change. You have to let them understand, have opportunities to grow.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Donald. Actually, we are finishing 446 episode. Last around 2 years, every day we are working hard. We are trying to bring in some of the great people like Professor Jack, Professor David Smith, Professor Donald, more than 300 speakers, politicians, corporate person, NGO persons, people from corporations, from academia, everybody joining in World Talent Economy Forums, because we are trying to develop a good story. I have a story. When 2009, 2012, first I go to Oxford University, I find many of my friends from Singapore. Then I go to Cambridge University. I find many of the friends actually come from Singapore. I asked my friend Mr. Erinto from Singapore, now he lives in Singapore, that what is the issue that many Singapore people come to this great university? They said, this is our strategy. We focus on human resource. We do not have natural resources. So we send all of the talented to the Ivy League university, and they develop themselves, and then they go back to Singapore and they develop their country. Then I invite him in Bangladesh, in United International University. Can you share your story with our people? This is one of my experience. I learned that why talent economy is important. The developing world, I believe money is not a problem for developing world. Only two things. If we focused on meritocracy, if we just focus on the talented people, if we give more support to the talented people, and we can reduce the corruption. And final thing, if we can develop a better policy like Singapore, we can develop the developing worlds. So this is also my learning from Singapore. I am a big fan of Singapore model. So Mr. Jackson also from Singapore, his organization also playing a very good role. And hopefully through all of our initiative, we can change the developing world. And definitely developed world support is also important, because they have resources, they have knowledge, they have technology, they have modern engineering, science and technology. If they share with developing world, then we can solve many problems, especially in the COVID situation. Many people do not getting vaccine. I request all of the developed world, please help the developing world. They need vaccine, they need support for healthcare system. We need to work together. We need to work hard. Next week, we will introduce another, like today's session, another famous women entrepreneur. Because today we discuss more about women entrepreneurships. Her name is, she is from Saudi Arabia. Her name is Samira Aziz. She is one of the women entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia, and she is from media. So we will introduce her in the World Talent Economy Forum. And beside that, we organized last week a debate because of huge popularity. Even I request Professor Jackson, if you have time, I know you are very busy, you can join in our debate activities, because world famous debaters actually join in our debating activities. Next Friday night, we have a special debate, and our debate topic is this house believes that humans should invest in technology to explore and colonize other planets. So it will be like last session. It will be based on Asian parliamentary format. Professor Jackson, last week you can see from our World Talent Economy Forum, Professor Donald, Professor David Smith, and all famous speakers, they join in the debate. This debate was so popular. I get huge response from around the world. They love to see more debate. So that's why we decide we will arrange debate. And the professional people like you will attend in the debate. If Professor Jackson, you are interested, we want to invite you in our mock parliament. I'm sure this topic and debate will be very interesting. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Professor Jackson.
Oh, thank you very much, everybody. I think that don't think also about meritocracy, because meritocracy measure only by academic result, and that's not meritocracy for real. Try to think about every child, every person as a multiple intelligent person. A farmer is intelligent. He can tell you things about crop and pests and weather that you don't know. An artisan, a carpenter can tell you about wood grains and which way to carve it, and you don't know. So respect everybody, and then that is real meritocracy. Going to Harvard University has no difference as going to any university, except the networks and friends and contacts that you can get from an elitist society. Other than that, all the books, all the lessons, you're going to learn exactly the same as you go to an ordinary university. So always be very careful when you enter into an elitist society. Don't think of all the glamour. Is it equitable? Are the Harvard graduate going to Boston to create the financial crisis in America and make Wall Street collapse? I mean, they're from Harvard. So don't be too blinded by all this glitz and glamour. Think about humanity, how to make life better for others, and no need to be so, you know, high profile and glamorous.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for your advice. This is also important for our youth communities. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today?
I agree with Jackson, is that we need to address this issue across all age groups, all demographics, and begin to institutionalize it as in what we're doing. We're at inflection points in many different areas as we look around the world, from climate change to ways we are seeing the issues coming together of trying to balance out access to technology, access to entrepreneurship, access to education. And this is just one of the other ones that we really need to make sure we have in the issue so that we can choose the correct arrows from our quiver to use to address this very important issue. So, Jack, thank you so much for what you're doing to advance this across the ecosystems.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks?
It's interesting. Jack said exactly the same, or not exactly, in a different way, the same thing that I was going to. There's a wonderful book I'd recommend called The Tyranny of Merit. And in the United States, what's happened is that the entrance exams to schools can be basically gamed. You can get, if you get trained by the right people, you take the right courses and things like that. Now, who can do that? The very wealthy can afford to have the tutors for their kids and do that. So what's winding up happening is that we're like basically making the whole idea of merit, and we have this idea of is actually making the society more separate and more. I often point out to people that every single solitary person in this world knows something you don't know. Every single one. You can learn from anyone. I can't tell you how many times homeless people have helped me find transportation or told me where it's safe to be in a city and not safe, and how to be safe in a city. I meet random people everywhere who've helped me and taught me things. It's everyone. And so we've got to be really, really careful with the idea of merit, because it, in a way, people justify the amount of money that Bezos has, and you know how wonderful Elon Musk is, and I think he's an a-hole myself, but I don't like the guy at all. But they justify that, and they're not willing to be able to understand the value of everybody. And I think that's how you can make change, is because when you value people, you can listen. They'll listen. You listen to them, they'll listen to you. I mean, people are pretty happy when you respect somebody and think they're interesting and a good person. They'll talk about themselves for a while, and then part of their brain will go, "Oh gosh, it's my turn to listen." and that'll wind up happening. So I think the whole idea of that Jack has and the way that he's working on it just seems stellar to me, because that's what we need to do, is to get in with people. And oh yeah, I wanted to say one other thing. We talk about the developing world, and we talk about how to influence people in the developing world. And I'm going to tell you something. With ancestry, I found out that I am completely white. I mean, there isn't one bit of genetic part of me that's anything but white. And I went to a prep school. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite of what we're talking about. I'm part of the elite. I grew up that way. And, you know, I mentioned that I know Paul Sappho. I mean, he went to Harvard and Oxford and all those kinds of things. Those are the kind of people I know, I grew up with. So we can talk about changing the narratives and the stories of all the people that are needing toilets and things like that, which is incredibly important. But it's also incredibly important that somebody like me starts coming up with understanding these different stories and these different narratives, and working within our group and my group. My group they're the ones. I just read a book about how the Industrial Revolution was basically caused by weapons. That was the first. It's a great book. It's called, let's see what I've got it here somewhere. The Empire of Guns. I really, if you have time, to recommend it. But the United States spends $750 billion a year on our military. And the United States then goes out and dominates everybody, extracts their resources. When you get into a resource extraction economy, things are really messed up because there becomes an elite that controls the resources and they don't share it with anyone else. So I think one of the parts of change that's really important and really has to happen isn't necessarily all in the developing world. I think the developing world really needs to clean up its act too. So, there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor David Smith, Professor Donald, and Professor Jackson for giving us this is an excellent session. Very, very good session for our audience. I'm sure our audience can learn many things. And thank you for joining today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with your corporation, and with your academy. Especially, we are a big fan of grassroots level. So share our content with the grassroots level people. I'm sure these are the real entrepreneurs. They can solve many problems in the developing world. Thank you, Professor Jackson, Professor David Smith, and Professor Donald for joining today's session. Bye-bye and take care. We have a great debate. If Professor Jackson join in the debate sessions, I'm sure you will enjoy a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye.